On the far edge of our village, where the fields give way to untamed wilderness, stood a house that had long surrendered to the elements. It wasn't just old, it was a place forgotten by time, a structure that seemed to sag under the weight of unspoken stories. The villagers called it Hisi Lamhe, the unnamed house. No one knew who had built it or why it was abandoned so abruptly. Its windows were like hollow eyes, staring out blankly at the changing seasons, and its once sturdy wooden door was now a weathered grey, sealed not by a lock, but by a thick tapestry of fear that had been woven over generations of whispered tales and frightened glances. The elders in the village would often sit under the banyan tree, their voices dropping to a low hush whenever the house was mentioned. They spoke of strange lights flickering in the empty windows on moonless nights, a phenomenon no one could explain. Some claimed to have heard faint, sorrowful music drifting from its dilapidated walls, a melody that seemed to hang in the air long after it had ceased. The most chilling story, however, was that of a family who had simply vanished within its confines decades ago, leaving behind a half-eaten meal on the dining table, as if they had been plucked from existence in an instant. These tales served as a powerful deterrent, keeping even the most adventurous children at a safe distance. The unnamed house became a symbol of all things mysterious and forbidden. It was a landmark of caution, a physical manifestation of the boundary between the known world of the village and the unpredictable realm of the unknown. Mothers would warn their children not to wander too close, invoking the house's name as a surefire way to ensure obedience. The path leading to it was overgrown with thorny bushes and weeds, as if nature itself was conspiring to keep its secrets hidden. The air around the property felt different, heavier, colder, and unnervingly still, creating a palpable sense of unease that seeped into the very soul of anyone who dared to approach. Over time, the house became more than just a structure. It transformed into a legend, a piece of local folklore. Each retelling of its story added another layer of mystique, another shadow to its already dark reputation. It stood as a silent testament to the idea that some questions are better left unanswered, and some doors are best left unopened. The village had collectively decided to leave the house to its ghosts, to let it crumble into dust, along with the secrets it held so tightly within its decaying frame. It was a place of sorrow, best respected from afar, a somber monument to a past that refused to be completely erased. In our village lived a young man named Shekhar, whose spirit was fueled by an insatiable curiosity that often put him at odds with the cautious traditions of our community. While others saw the unnamed house as a place of dread, Shekhar saw it as a puzzle waiting to be solved. He was a reader of books and a listener of stories, but he believed that truth could only be found through direct experience. The hushed warnings of the elders did not frighten him. Instead, they ignited a flame of determination within him. He felt an inexplicable pull towards the house, a calling that he could no longer ignore, believing that the truth, whatever it might be, was far less terrifying than the imagined horrors that haunted the villagers' minds. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, casting long, dancing shadows across the fields, Shekhar made his decision. He told no one of his plan, knowing it would only be met with pleas and prohibitions. With a small satchel containing a flashlight, a water bottle, and a heart full of nervous excitement, he set off on the overgrown path. The silence that enveloped him was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant cry of a bird. With each step closer to the house, the air grew cooler, and the familiar sounds of the village faded behind him, replaced by an imposing quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. Reaching the property, Shekhar stood before the great wooden door, its surface scarred with the passage of time. He placed his hand upon it, feeling the rough, splintered texture under his palm. It was surprisingly not locked. With a deep breath to steady his racing heart, he pushed. The door groaned in protest, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the stillness, as if the house itself was sighing at the intrusion. It swung open into a gaping darkness, revealing a hallway filled with dust motes dancing in the slivers of fading daylight that pierced through the grime-covered windows. The air that rushed out was stale and musty, carrying the scent of decay and forgotten memories. Stepping inside felt like crossing a threshold into another world. The door swung shut behind him with a soft but definitive click, plunging him into near-complete darkness. The silence within the house was even more profound than it had been outside, a heavy, suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb all sound. Shekhar fumbled for his flashlight, and with a click, a bright beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a grand staircase covered in a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs hung like ethereal curtains from the ceiling, and the furniture, draped in white cloths, looked like ghostly sentinels standing guard over the house's secrets. He was finally inside, alone with the history that everyone else feared. Shekhar began his exploration on the ground floor, his flashlight beam sweeping across rooms frozen in time. In the living room, a rocking chair sat motionless by the hearth, a thin layer of dust perfectly preserving its stillness. He moved into the dining room, and his light fell upon the very scene described in the village legends, a long wooden table set for a meal. Plates with the dried, dark remnants of food lay untouched, and overturned glasses suggested a sudden departure. It was a chillingly domestic scene, made macabre by the decades of neglect. He could almost imagine the family seated there, their laughter and conversation abruptly silenced by an unseen force, leaving behind this haunting tableau for him to discover. He ascended the creaking staircase, each step groaning under his weight as if complaining about the disturbance. The upper floor held a series of bedrooms, each one a personal shrine to a life interrupted. In one room, a small wooden toy horse lay on its side near a child's bed, its painted eyes seeming to follow his every move. In another, a woman's shawl was draped carelessly over the back of a chair, as if she had just stepped away for a moment. Shekhar felt a growing sense of melancholy. This was not just an abandoned house, but a home filled with the ghosts of unfinished lives. He was not just an intruder, but an unwelcome witness to a private tragedy that had been sealed away from the world. It was in the master bedroom, at the far end of the hall, that the atmosphere shifted from melancholic to deeply unsettling. The air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible melody began to fill the silence. It was a soft, sorrowful tune, like a lullaby hummed from a great distance. Shekhar froze, his flashlight beam trembling in his hand. He scanned the room, but it was empty. The music seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, weaving its way into his thoughts. He tried to convince himself it was the wind, but the sound was too clear, too deliberate to be a trick of nature. It was the music the villagers had spoken of. Suddenly, a child's laughter echoed from the hallway he had just walked through. It was a joyful, innocent sound. Yet in the oppressive silence of the house, it was utterly terrifying. Shekhar's blood ran cold. He spun around, shining his light down the dark corridor, but there was nothing there. The laughter faded, replaced once more by the haunting silence. Then, a whisper, as soft as the rustle of silk, seemed to breathe right next to his ear. It was a single word, a name, his name, Shekhar. The voice was gentle, almost pleading, yet it filled him with a primal fear he had never known, a dread that rooted him to the spot. Days turned into a week, and Shekhar did not return to the village. His absence, once a quiet worry, blossomed into full-blown panic. A search party, braver in the daylight and in numbers, was organized. The men, armed with courage and tools, approached the unnamed house, their usual fear momentarily suppressed by their concern for the missing youth. They found the front door slightly ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Calling his name, they stepped cautiously inside, their voices swallowed by the same profound silence that had greeted Shekhar. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. They searched the ground floor, their lanterns casting eerie, elongated shadows on the walls. The dining room table, with its petrified meal, sent a shiver down their spines, but there was no sign of Shekhar. They moved upstairs, their footsteps echoing the ones he had made just days before. They checked each bedroom, finding the toy horse and the draped shawl, remnants of a past that felt increasingly present. The house was exactly as the legends described it, but of the curious young man who had dared to enter, there was no trace. It was as if the house had simply consumed him, adding him to its collection of lost souls. It was in the master bedroom that they made their discovery, though it was not the one they had expected. On a small, dust-free writing desk in the corner, a place Shekhar's flashlight beam had missed, sat an old, leather-bound journal. The final entry was written in a familiar hand, Shekhar's. His neat script detailed his entry into the house and his growing sense of unease. But the last few lines were different. The writing became frantic, scrawled. He wrote of the music, the laughter, and the whisper. He described a sudden, overwhelming feeling of belonging, a sense that he had been here before, that he was not a visitor, but someone who was finally returning. The final, chilling sentence of the journal provided the twist that would haunt the village forever. "They are calling for me," he had written. "The woman with the shawl, my mother. The child with the toy horse, my little brother. They are all here. The table is set, and they have been waiting for me for so long. At last our family is together again. I am not Shekhar. I am the one who was lost." The search party stared at the page, the truth settling upon them like a shroud. Shekhar hadn't been an intruder uncovering a stranger's secret. He was the secret itself, the last missing piece of a family that had vanished decades ago, drawn back by a memory he never knew he had. The house wasn't unnamed, it was his, and now he was home.